So Desean Jackson said he posted a quote on Instagram. Now, he thought the quote was from Adolf Hitler. It was not. Sidebar, guys, if you're posting a quote from Adolf Hitler on your Instagram, I don't care what it's advocating, don't do it. If Adolf Hitler is like, look, if you're making chocolate chip cookies, make sure you use this kind of flour because this kind of flour is the best version. Don't post it. Even if he's right. Doesn't matter. You just go to Martha Stewart. She knows, and she didn't kill 6 million Jews. You don't ever need to post anything where Adolf Hitler is siding with what you're saying. And if Adolf Hitler is siding with what you're saying, maybe what you're saying is the worst thing ever. Why? Because Adolf Hitler said it, right? It's super simple. It's the most simple thing in the world. It's like those diagrams where it's like, did you do this? And you say yes, you go over here. If you said no, you go over here. And then you keep going until you find your final answer. This diagram says, do you agree with Hitler? No. Good. Yes. What the is wrong with you? That's the whole diagram. And so Desean Jackson posts this quote, or reshares the quote, on his Instagram story from who he thought was Adolf Hitler. It was not Adolf Hitler, so Adolf Hitler's name is... we don't want to drag Adolf Hitler's name through the mud, so let's clear that up. Hitler didn't actually say this. Now, killing 6 million Jews, ethnic cleansing, all that stuff, that's still Hitler. This is the quote. Boom, this is a quote from what was on Desean Jackson's Instagram story. Quote, the white Jews... Look, guys, here's another good way to know if you shouldn't share something. If you're going to share it, and the first words are the white Jews, do not share, do not share, do not share. We said it last week on the podcast. If you have an argument, and the beginning of your argument is, well, I saw this on Tucker Carlson, don't say the argument, all right? Not worth saying. You've already ruined it. So if your statement is the white Jews blank, not good. I continue. Quote, the white Jews knows... I gotta start over now. The white Jews knows that the Negroes are the real children of Israel, and to keep America's secret, the Jews will blackmail America. Okay? Not a strong start. Continuing with the quote. They will extort America. And all these theys and theirs are, again, the white Jews. They will extort America. Their plan for world domination won't work if the Negroes know who they were. The white citizens of America will be terrified to know that all this time they've been mistreating and discriminating and lynching the children of Israel. So we can see the problem here, right? We can see where this is a bit of an issue. Now let's talk about the actual Desean Jackson posting this. What we always say on the podcast, and even before we had social unrest, even before stuff like this, just in general, I have always advocated that the real responsibility of you and anyone else is to educate themselves. Just educate yourselves on whatever. If you want to be a better civil servant, if you want to be involved in social justice, read up on it. Do some research. Just kind of get in there. Make yourself smarter. That should be every single person's individual responsibility, is to educate themselves on whatever they want to be involved in. It sounds super simple, right? I'll go back to the chocolate chip baking thing. If you want to talk about baking and be involved in baking and you want to start baking, a good way to do that is to start watching baking videos or read up about baking strategies. Start to do things. Start to get involved so that when you talk about it or do anything with it, you can sound educated and you won't make a fool of yourself by quoting Hitler. Desean Jackson has made a simple mistake that I think a lot of people make, especially make on social media in today's day and age. They hear something, they don't educate themselves on it, and they want to get involved, and they have a huge platform, and they post something, and it's obviously picked up by millions of people. Do you have an aunt that maybe isn't incredibly well educated and who shares stories that say things like Hillary Clinton proven to be lizard alien, bought new home, has rocket ship to the moon. And then you look at the website where it's from, it's like myfox23 channel breakingnews.com. And you're like, you know it's fake, right? She doesn't know it's fake. And she reshared it, which means she thinks it's so true, she wants everyone else to know about it. Now, that's not that big of a deal because it's your aunt and no one's going to read that. But Desean Jackson is not your aunt. I don't think so, at least. And if it is, that's fine. But Desean Jackson has a huge platform. So when he reshares stuff that's completely just so screwed up, it obviously becomes a big deal. So Desean Jackson probably wanted to get involved with the social justice situation. He wanted to get involved with the conversation that's happening right now in America, which I don't blame him for. And he probably saw this long paragraph and said, whew, man, I'm not really going to read any of this stuff, but I see stuff like, let's see. He probably saw stuff like, if we'll be terrified to know all this time they've been mistreating and discriminating, good, lynching, okay, Desean Jackson's feeling it, he's starting to understand things. America's Secret, Blackmail America, okay, bam, Extort America, I'm in. Right? He probably thought, look, those are buzzwords that I hear all the time. I really enjoy kind of that whole idea. I feel you. We are being mistreated. There is discrimination. There's lynching. Sure, I'm resharing this. He might even be driving. I don't know. And he just reshares it. Now, there's a little bit of context to this particular quote. Things like white Jews, America's Secret, Jews blackmailing America, stuff like that. World domination. I digress. We understand that this quote is incredibly anti-Semitic, incredibly racist, ignorant, any bad word that you can think of to describe a thought. This is it. Okay? I don't have to sit here and say why this is wrong. Now, Desean Jackson apologized. He came back and said, look, I don't hate anybody. I'm not anti-Semitic. My bad. I misinterpreted it. I just reshared it. Whatever. He basically admitted to the classic, I'm out of my depth here. I'm out of my depth here. I screwed up. My B. Instagram, not the place for this. So, we're not going to, right now, we're not going to skewer Desean Jackson too much. I honestly do not believe that he meant to say this. I honestly do not believe he knows what a lot of this even means. I mean, I don't think that he could tell you about any of this stuff. I mean, I don't think, Children of Israel, I'm not sure if he knows what that, he might think that's like a new band or something. And I might be giving Desean Jackson too much credit. Because if he actually does believe this whole paragraph, then there's a huge problem. And that sounds like I'm giving him a way out, but I'm not giving him a way out because I'm going to circle back around once we start talking about the reaction. Now, I promise you, I'm going to come down hard on this whole thing, something that no one else is doing. So, should Desean Jackson apologize for this? 100%. Should he be reprimanded for this? 100%. Should he be, all the things? Yes. Checkbox, yes. This is awful. This should not be said. Now let's take a look at some reaction. First, we're going to go to Steven Jackson. So Steven Jackson was very vocal with the Drew Brees situation, with the George Floyd situation. We played Steven Jackson's very clip on this show when we talked about George Floyd. Steven Jackson, another person who has wanted to get very involved in social justice and civil unrest, and he wants to seemingly make the world a more equal place. Now, he comes out in defense of Desean Jackson. Note to listener, if you are defending someone, use the diagram previously mentioned where if they are siding with Hitler, do not defend them. So Steven Jackson defends Desean Jackson. I'm starting to get these mixed up. Steven Jackson defends Desean Jackson. Desean Jackson plus Hitler over here. And then Steven Jackson is another guy. Steven Jackson defending Hitler and company. He comes out and says that, Desean Jackson's speaking the truth and he shouldn't have had to apologize. Here's his actual quote. I didn't support the post as far as Hitler and him supporting Hitler. I didn't know support Hitler. I didn't know nothing about Hitler, and I could give a fook about Hitler. All I know is he was a cruel guy, which is kind of a funny statement because it's like, how is that possibly all you know about Hitler? You know, it's like, I just couldn't imagine being like, you know, I want to be vocal with civil unrest. I want to be vocal with what's happening in America. I want to be vocal with racism. Okay, what do you know about Hitler? I don't know anything about Hitler. I heard he was not a great guy, though. Again, you might want to educate yourself before. Anyways, I'll keep going. My whole reason for supporting D-Jack was, before I got on Instagram, he called me on the phone and told me that they was threatening to fire him. But they didn't do that to Riley Cooper. Backstory: Riley Cooper was a receiver for the Eagles who was seen in a video saying the N-word out in public. The Eagles did reprimand Cooper and ended up fining him, and he was let go of the team like 2 years later. And I was like, you're right. You shouldn't have to apologize if they didn't make him apologize. Again, no, wrong. Not the thing to say. Yes, he should definitely apologize. Why did you have to say this? And in a now deleted post, Steven Jackson mentioned that that Desean Jackson was just speaking the truth. So this is where we're going to start getting into the real rant here. We're already like 15 minutes into this, so sorry if this takes a while. But this is where we get into the real issue. Here's another Steven Jackson quote. So I just read a statement that the Philadelphia Eagles posted regarding Desean Jackson's comments. He was trying to educate himself, educate people, and he's speaking the truth, right? He's speaking the truth. You know he don't hate nobody, but he's speaking the truth. The fact that he know and try to educate others, but y'all don't want us to educate ourselves. Whew, that's bad. That's real bad. All that is wrong. All that is bad. First bad. He was trying to educate himself, educate people, and he's speaking the truth. Right? Wrong. Absolutely wrong. He is not trying to educate himself. That's the whole problem. Educating people, good God, I hope he's not educating anybody else. Because if he's educating anybody else about the secret children of Israel and the secret army of white Jews trying to find world domination, not who needs to be educating people. Next part, that's wrong. He's speaking the truth. Wrong. You know he don't hate nobody. Wrong. That quote literally hates white Jews. Completely anti-Semitic. Wrong. But he's speaking the truth. We already said that's wrong. The fact that he know and try to educate others, we've already talked about that. Wrong. But y'all don't want us to educate ourselves. Okay. So that's all screwed up. So then, now the mass media comes in. Stephen A. Smith and Max Kellerman on First Take decided to address this. Let's hear and react to what Stephen A. Smith had to say about this situation.
Steven Jackson's a good brother, but I've disagreed with him a couple of times over the last few weeks, and I disagree with him today.
Good. So Stephen A. Smith disagrees with Stephen A. Jackson. Stephen A. Jackson. Why are all their names so similar? Good. Stephen A. Smith disagrees with Stephen Jackson. Good start, Stephen. Continue.
What truth are you talking about? Care to elaborate? Because the Jewish community is saying that what Desean Jackson said is not true.
This is a really interesting statement. This is where you know you're sunk already when the first couple lines of what you're saying make absolutely no sense at all. I like how he's like, what truth are you talking about? The Jewish community said this isn't true. And could you imagine the Jewish community like having a representative and they're sitting there and it's like, here are the charges against you. Charge 1, trying to have secret world domination as a group of white Jews holding down the black people who are the secret children of Israel. How do you plead, white Jewish champion? And the white Jewish guy's like, well, that's not true. And then Stephen A. Smith's like, look, man, they're saying that ain't even true.
But number 2, and more importantly, and this is where this gets deep for me, Max, I think that Stephen Jackson, his passion and his heart is in the right place, but he's veering away from what the ultimate goal is.
This kind of touches on what we were talking about. Now, I don't know if I would have used ultimate goal anytime you're talking about Hitler and the ultimate solution. I digress. But this is kind of what I was talking about. Stephen A. Smith saying, like, look, man, his heart is in the right place, but his mind is not there. His passion. Sorry about the headphones, by the way. That's how I'm listening to the Stephen A. Smith thing and reacting to it here. I'm not making a hip hop album, so I'm not the newest member of New Kids on the Block. I just am listening like this, and then I take it off and react. And if you're listening on audio, I look like Donnie Wahlberg. So I think what Stephen A. Smith here is saying is like, that's kind of what we're saying, right? That yeah, he's passionate, sure, but he's a little misguided. Which I can buy that.
George Floyd had this white cop keep his knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. For the last 2+ minutes, there was no response from George Floyd.
This is a sidebar, but how he says George Floyd had this white cop, I don't like the qualifier there because, you get to the point to where at that point it's like that doesn't really matter, because if it was a black cop who did this to George Floyd, it'd be just as bad. And we've talked about on the show, I don't think the cop is a African-American hunting bounty hunter. He is a bad cop. He is an awful cop who should be arrested for murder. I don't think he was fueled by racial... I think that's almost giving the cop, or almost giving bad cops kind of a cop out. No pun intended. But I don't like that even starting, just to say, oh, well, this white cop did this, because that part doesn't matter whatsoever. And it's about way more than that. It's about more than, or I at least I believe the movement is much more about just blanket equality versus white racist cops murdering African Americans. It should be about like a whole systemic problem in the nation. It should be more about a problem of who are cops trained? Are they mentally able to do the job? Why are there so many shootings? What happens? It shouldn't just be about racial murderers, I guess.
As a result, we see what has happened in our society today. So we've gone from George Floyd getting choked to death, essentially, to statues being torn down, to tweets. But all along the way, when we talk about these things and the symbolic gestures that have come along with it, our ultimate goal of really creating change to address racial oppression, racial inequality, police brutality, and those things, it's fallen by the wayside.
Something else we've echoed a lot here on the podcast is that, just like we said, the social injustice, the racial inequality, all that stuff, that's what's important. What's not important is tearing down statues. What's not important is, these tweets or black boxes on Instagram, and the message is getting muddied for sure. And this kind of stuff, just like the Bubba Wallace situation we talked about last week, that muddies this situation, is that you start to focus on tearing down a statue of Columbus when you should be focusing on police reform. You focus on Bubba Wallace's noose. Is it a noose? Is it not a noose? Is he lying? Is he telling the truth? When you should be focusing on, Bubba Wallace is an African-American driver in a very predominantly white sport. How is he changing that sports narrative, right? So I'm okay with what he's saying here. Now let's see how he finishes.
Because these kind of things allow folks, particularly white folks, to have something that distracts us from what's really going on.
Whoa. What? Whoa. This is way off. We have veered incredibly far away from where we need to be. This is on ESPN, okay? This is so bad. And I'm going to let him finish because maybe he's going to save himself, because that was real bad. And then I'll take the headphones off and we'll really get into this. Please save yourself, Steven.
Because I got news for you. Even though you might have a lighter hue, a lighter pigmentation, the Jewish community, not the white community, the Jewish community is the one that had to endure the Holocaust. When we talk about 6 million Jews that were murdered by that devil, Adolf Hitler, that wasn't white people that was murdered, those were Jewish folks.
Wow, again, holy shit. Can you imagine? Like, this is the beginning of his argument, is that there's a distinction between white people in just the sentence of white people weren't murdered in the Holocaust, Jewish people were murdered in the Holocaust. It's like, is it? I feel like he's trying to trick me, like a riddle or something. I mean, this is, you know, we'll let him go. We'll let him go. We'll let him go.
So, from a categorical perspective, it's two different. It's two different groups, okay? When we're talking about racial oppression, racial inequality, and beyond, we're talking about what's happening in this nation. In this nation. Now, we might sit up there and look at the Jewish community, and Max, you have educated me about that because the perception was Jewish folks stick together, and obviously they're incredibly empowered and stuff like that. And you, as I'm sure you will do again, had to educate me about things that go on in the Jewish community and how folks feel about those things. And I stand back because I'm not Jewish, you are. But I can tell you this. When we sit up there, a lot of people in the black community respect the Jewish community because the perception of y'all being together and coming together and galvanizing to address certain issues is what we believe as a community we should do a better job of. But who is that against? It's against white folks.
Guys, I don't know how else to stress this, but can you imagine ESPN, a huge media company, signing off on the statements of that we are against white folk. We are against white folk. Anyone saying that. If it's we are against black folk, we are against Jewish folk, we are against Asian folk, all of that is wrong. All of that is wrong. This is where I'm really disappointed. And I'll give Stephen A. Smith this, and Steven Jackson this. They definitely did a good job in making Desean Jackson look better. Desean Jackson, in my opinion, his crime is being ignorant and just not knowing what the hell he was sharing. Steven Jackson and Stephen A. Smith, they had time to think about what they were saying. And they had time to formulate a response. And they had time to deal with this. And they had time to come up with something. And what they came up with was some kind of weird apology, or not even apology, but some kind of weird excuse for why his message was right, but is taking us away from the important message, which is still to just attack the white folk. I think this is like where this all ends, really. I personally think Stephen A. Smith should be fired for this. I think he should be, and if you hear a background noise, guys, there's a lawnmower. The person next to the studio is cutting their grass, and I think they may be trimming the side of the wall here because it sounds like they're coming into the room. But this is where I think it all ends. This is where I think people have completely missed the message, and this is where the message probably goes. What people do not want to hear, or what they shouldn't hear, is the idea that we're in a white versus black, or Jewish and black versus white, or anything like that. That's not what we should be striving for. If what you want is the elimination of white people, you're racist. If what you want is the elimination of African Americans, you're racist. If what you want is the elimination of secret white Jews, you are racist. This is racist. This is awful. This is a problem. It's kind of too easy to generalize it like this, but if you just replace white folk during Stephen A. Smith's tirade and make it anything else, gay folk, Chinese folk, anything, red hair, whatever, you pick. Sagittarius folk, doesn't matter. It's crazy. You start hearing him say things like, this is distracting us from the ultimate goal, which is against the gay folk. You hear something like that, and you're like, whoa, man, that is crazy homophobic. Like, that is not just homophobic, but that is, like, radical homophobic. It can be one thing to, like, disagree with a group, whether it's white or black or you know, the gay community or whatever. You may not agree, but that doesn't mean you're outright against them and denouncing them and talking about the destruction of them, the takedown of them. The point he's at, in my opinion, is radical. I mean, if I heard someone say stuff like this about any race, I would feel like, whoa, this guy's way off. Like, this guy's way past where he needs to be. And that's where you get whenever you get to these points where everything is white or black, and where you have to choose a side, basically. Where we try and not do that, right? We try here to push away from this. I'm kind of shocked that there's not more backlash for this, for what Stephen A. Smith said, what ESPN's putting out there. The fact that Stephen A. Smith had a long time to think about this and write about this and edit this, and this is what he came up with. I know it's a live show or whatever, but he prepared for the show, and he did more preparation for the show than I did for this show, I can tell you that much. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we need to be against the African American folk. I'm not going to say that. I'm prepared enough right now not to say we need to be against the Jewish folk. This is where now I don't even think people know what they're saying. I think people are blindly trying to support a cause so much that is turning into hate for another group. Another thing that I thought that was disgusting of what Stephen A. Smith said was when he said that the anti-Semitism is distracting from the ultimate goal. How unbelievably selfish and short-sighted and blinded can you be to where you're saying that the obvious racism of a different group isn't up to the level of your group, and that their oppression and their, them dealing with their racial issue, which here is anti-Semitism, that this incredibly anti-Semitic thing is a distraction from what you're trying to get done. That right there is all you really need to know about what he thinks and what this entire little section or this video or whatever is trying to convey. Is that what he should have said was, and what I say is, hatred on any level, whether it's anti-Semitic or against African Americans or against Asians or against gays or against trans or whatever, is not and should not be tolerated. And it's not, there is not a pecking order. It's not, okay, well, as long as you're not racist against African Americans, we can figure it out. But do not be racist against African Americans. Oh, don't worry, I'm just anti-Semitic. Okay, well, that goes down here a little bit, and that's kind of like we'll solve the anti-Semitism, but don't let that get involved with the stuff at the higher tiers, because we got to solve that first, and then we'll come down here to the anti-Semitism. And then, at the very, okay, you're dealing with the homophobic situation. Okay, that's tiered down here, so that's below. So once we deal with the anti-Semitism, we'll get down to this, and we'll figure this out. But first, we got to figure out the stuff at the top here. So just like Desean Jackson, we're going to push this anti-Semitism idea first, and then we'll deal with the rest. Like, it's all the same. It's all a blanket. Hatred is hatred. Inequality is inequality. The basis of hating a group or stereotyping a group or dealing with a group or a person because of their creed, their color, whatever, is wrong. And it's disgusting to me. And I said this with the George Floyd stuff. And now I'm having to speak for everybody. It's disgusting. There's no room for it. We are in 2020, and if you are still pushing narratives like this, like Stephen A. Smith's pushing, he should be removed from the airwaves. ESPN should retract everything he said, and they should put out a statement saying Stephen A. Smith is not on the air anymore. Stephen A. Smith said the following things. We do not want to do anything like what Stephen A. Smith's saying. We offended the Jewish community. We offended the white community. We are sorry. We screwed up. And then you look at like the Drew Brees situation. Drew Brees was dragged by Steven Jackson, dragged by Stephen A. Smith, dragged by Shannon Sharp, by everybody about what he said. And what did he say? That he wasn't going to kneel for the flag because he respected the flag and he respected the military? Do y'all remember when we were cursing out, not we, but when people were cursing out Drew Brees and people were screaming that Drew Brees should retire from the NFL? And Steven Jackson and Stephen A. Smith have the gall to say that, oh, well, I mean, the Eagles shouldn't have to try and cut. I mean, come on. The Eagles shouldn't cut Desean Jackson for saying that white Jews are secretly trying to keep the true children of Israel down. Are you kidding me? Look, guys, I think it's a little crazy to think that Desean Jackson, who thought he was sharing an Adolf Hitler quote, look, listen, the Confederacy was bad, okay? We need all Confederate statues torn down. We need all Confederate, we need everything mentioning the Confederacy. Dixie Chicks, change your name. Dixie Beer, change your name. I don't want to hear I don't want to hear nothing about the Confederacy. If I hear, look, Antebellum, Lady Antebellum, change your name. I don't want anything south of the Mason-Dixon. Get it out of my face. Desean Jackson is literally thinking he's quoting Adolf Hitler. Don't distract me from what I'm doing here. Don't distract me with that right now. Okay, I'm in the zone. I'm right now canceling Drew Brees. Get that shit out of my face. We're trying to get Drew Brees out of New Orleans and out of the NFL. Didn't Drew Brees just donate $5 million to the city of New Orleans for the COVID? Shut your mouth. Shut your mouth. Shut your stupid mouth. Drew Brees is a racist pig. What did Drew Brees say? I'm glad you asked. Drew Brees said that he is not kneeling for the flag because he respects the military. Yeah, Desean Jackson is quoting Hitler. Like, do you see where this is all screwed up? Do you see where this has become a problem? Do you see where Stephen A. Smith sounds like a racist? Do you see where Stephen A. Jackson sounds like a racist? Do you see where Desean Jackson sounds like a racist? And did any of them apologize? Besides, I guess Desean Jackson did. Did any of them come out with the same vitriol, come out with the same calling for their heads as with Drew Brees? And what Stephen A. Smith said is way worse than what Drew Brees said. I am so sick to death of this, and it's so embarrassing. And honestly, there are a lot of people out there who are really fighting for something, and are really fighting for change, and really want to see change. And the fact that Stephen A. Smith, Steven Jackson, and whoever else have these huge platforms, and they're spewing this hatred, and they're spewing this garbage, they are ruining the actual message. The actual message of inequality is completely screwed now. Because you got these guys who have no clue what they're talking about how the most anti-Semitic quote I think I've ever seen is a distraction for their ultimate goal, which is against the white folk. This is so... if I'm Stephen A. Smith, I'm resigning. I'm so embarrassed. I'm resigning. It's obvious at this point that he shouldn't be on... I mean, unless he's on some super insane radical network, he should be gone. And ESPN as a company that thinks that this is what people want to hear and that this is what they want to project makes me sick to my stomach. I don't watch the show. The clip came across my newsfeed when I was doing prep for this show, and I was hoping that his response would be anything that made sense, and it wasn't. And everyone's so scared to death to say anything that makes sense nowadays because of advertising and because of whatever. I'm not scared to say anything on this program. And I'll sit here and tell you right now that everything that in that quote that Desean Jackson said, everything Stephen Jackson said, everything Stephen A. Smith said is racist, is a problem, and is part of what we are trying to get rid of. And what we are trying to get rid of here is not the white folk, and it's not the white Jews, and it's not whoever's dominating the world from the secret children of Israel. That's not what we're trying to get rid of. I'm not trying to get rid of a group of people. I'm trying to get rid of a stereotype, a wrong ideal, a way of thinking that is so backwards. The color of someone's skin, where someone's from, their social status, their class, how much money they have in their bank account, whatever religion they are, whatever sex they are, whatever gender they are, shouldn't matter in any facet. Any facet at all. That's what I'm saying. If you're a white person, I don't care what Stephen A. Smith says. I don't think that you should be dealt with. I don't think that you are the problem. If you're an African American, I don't think you are the problem. Everyone should be treated equally. Everyone's the same. Everyone's a human being.